Hi, I am Carolyn Friedlander, and welcome to week 6 of the Shirts and Alphabet Quilt-along. It's the last week. We have made it to the end, and I'm excited to share with you my progress. So since last week, let's see, so my goals for this week were to add a label to my niece Violet's quilt, the twin size alphabet quilt that I have pieced together, quilted, and bound. It just needed a label. I also set out to make a quilt top using my shirts blocks. So I am happy to report that I've done both of those things. I made a sweet little label. It's very simple. It just says to Violet from Aunt Carolyn. And then I put 2024 just so that there's a little bit of a date. I am excited because she has a birthday coming up this weekend. So I wish I could say I planned everything to happen like this, but luckily it's just worked out. So the quilt is done and I will give it to her soon, and I really hope she likes it. As for shirts, let's see. So this whole quilt along and in Me Made May, I made shirts to complement clothes that I wore, as well as outfits and other details from my wedding that was in April. And I also had the shirts blocks that I made last year for last Me Made May. So what I really wanted to do was to join all of those shirts together, add borders, and make it a throw-sized quilt. This is a quilt that I imagine just cuddling up with on the couch. It's one that, there are a few things that make a quilt nice for cuddling up to, in my opinion. One, of course, is the feel. It has to be soft, it has to feel good, and that has to do with the fabrics, it has to do with the batting, it has to do with the quilting. But the other thing that I really love about a quilt that you're gonna curl up with is something that's just visually interesting and engaging. And so my little shirts blocks are perfect for that because each shirt is different. Each shirt represents an outfit, a garment that I've made, something that I wore somewhere. And I see those blocks and it takes me right back to that thing that I made or that fabric that I love, whatever it is. So, in that way, I am really excited about this quilt. And while I was sewing, okay, so I had all of the blocks, and if you remember, I've had them hanging. There's nothing on the wall back there, but in previous weeks, I had all of my blocks hanging back there, which was great. I loved looking at them while I was sewing, while I was adding blocks. It was really great. So I had the blocks from last year. They are already sewn together into a square of blocks. And then I was adding all of my shirts, in my new shirts, under them, in rows. And because they were laid out like that, I think it was really limiting how I was thinking about the layout. And I was just thinking that I would either add a new block, a new set of blocks below or above the blocks that I had made last year and already sewn together. But once I took them all down from the wall and I laid them out on the floor, I realized, of course, there are other ways to lay this out. And so I just started lining up the blocks all the way around the blocks that I'd pieced together from last year. And they wrapped around those blocks from last year almost perfectly. And there were only 3 missing blocks, so I needed to make 3 blocks to fill in the gap to finish up the round around the blocks that I'd made from last year, that unit. And I happened to have a shirt that didn't make it into the count last year for whatever reason. So I pulled that out, added that in, so now I just needed to sew 2 blocks. So I made 2 more blocks. I still have scraps here, so I pulled scraps that I liked. Things that didn't necessarily represent garments, they were just fabrics that I liked, colors that I liked, things I wanted to add in. So I made 2 more blocks and sewed those around the blocks that I had done last year. And it was funny, a friend of mine, I was showing her what I was working on, and she's like, oh, it'd be so cool if you just continue adding rounds of these shirt blocks like every year. And I agree, that would be very, very cool. I love that idea. However, I don't really want to have another another whip, another work in progress around. I just want this quilt to be finished. I have so many things just languishing around in the studio, and I think that that can weigh on you in some ways. And since I've been on a nice roll of finishing things up, it's felt really good and it's been motivating, and it just kind of like lightens the air. It just makes you feel less kind of, I don't know, when you have too many quilt tops laying around, it can just feel like such a burden that you haven't finished these. They're like such a reminder. And I don't want this quilt to feel that way. I am excited about it right now. I think it looks cool, and I'm excited to just get it finished and so that I can use it and enjoy it. And so I love the idea of adding more shirts around it, but I love the idea of finishing it more. So I added borders. So my first border is using a yarn dyed woven from my Harriet collection. And this is a thicker fabric, and I'm actually wearing shorts made out of that fabric now, but it is a little bit more of a garment fabric. You can definitely use it for patchwork, but it's very much more of a garment fabric. And I liked the idea of using more of a garment fabric for my borders just because it's my shirts quilt. It's made from garments. So initially I was thinking about maybe a linen, something that had kind of a nice texture, but then when I saw this Harriet fabric, as I was looking through other options, it's like, this is perfect. It has it has a green color to it, but otherwise it's very neutral. And so in terms of color and value, picking kind of like a lighter neutral for my border, it's allowing my darks to really pop, my lights to pop, and it just gives it this overall nice, even tone, kind of a nice even tone frame to the shirts blocks, so that the emphasis is really on the blocks, and the border is this nice kind of peaceful frame to those blocks, which I like. And also the other thing about this fabric from Harriet is just it's really soft, so it's going to quilt up nicely, and then as the quilt gets used and washed and loved, it's just going to feel really nice. And so after I added the first border, so I added a thick border all the way around, then I decided I wanted to make it a little bit longer. So I added a border to the top and one to the bottom. And the fabric that I chose for that is one of my crosshatch. It's a quilting cotton, and originally it was in architectures, but it's a pickle colorway. So it's that kind of limey green color that I like so much. And I chose this. I feel like borders, there are a lot of fabric choices in quilting that just come down to serendipity and proximity. And this, I've certain fabrics that are in that quilt that were in some of the blocks would catch my eye and be like, oh, that would be a great border. That looks good with that. And that was the case with this fabric. It is in at least one of the backgrounds of the blocks, and I loved it. Sometimes I like having borders that are very complementary. So the Harriet kind of green next to this crosshatch kind of green, they're kind of in the same family, but they're also really different. So the Harriet fabric has like it's such a rich texture, like physical texture, with those thick yarns that are woven together to create the fabric. And then the border fabric on the quilting cotton is screen printed. So it's very crisp, very clean, a very different visual texture rather than a physical texture. And so together, I just think that they work well together. So I like how that finishes it out. One thing I didn't do that I wanted to do, and I will do soon, maybe, I don't know, today or tomorrow, while I'm feeling the energy, is that I wanted to go ahead and cut and prepare my binding for this quilt. I don't know if you do this, but oftentimes not every time, but a lot of times after I finish the quilt top, I like going ahead and cutting the binding and getting it ready. Because a lot of times when you're finishing the quilt top, you're like very much in the zone with like the fabric selection, the colors, all of that stuff. So it can be a really good time to go ahead and pick that binding because you're already kind of in that frame of mind and you know what might be feeling good for it. Of course, you can totally pick it later. It's not a big deal, but I am in that mood. And I think for me, kind of what I said about the borders, that picking the borders as a big serendipity and proximity play a big role in that. I think that's true for binding too. So in some of the fabric choices, I like the idea of having a dark binding fabric. And at first I was thinking about a dark navy, one that I used for the trim in one of the wedding blocks. So I might use that, but then I kept seeing other dark fabrics that I have as shirts. Like there's another fabric from Harriet that's black and white. And then there was another one I saw that was also really dark. So I think what I want to do for the binding is to either, oh, and then a dark green. There's a dark green from Languid, my Languid collection, that I think would be really nice. So what I'm thinking is either to go with one of those fabrics or make it scrappy and cut a strip from several of the different dark fabrics and sewing them together. I think that could be really nice. Right now, that's kind of what I'm thinking. So maybe later today, I'll take the time to cut that binding. But anyway, that's what is going on with that. I'm excited. I'm really excited. So it turned out to be a pretty big throw size. I can like hold it over my head and it covers, you know, it's taller than I am. I haven't actually measured it, but it's pretty big. So the next steps will be to go ahead and get it quilted and bound. And so looking ahead, yes, I'm thinking about the quilting. I think it would be really beautiful to hand quilt it, especially in the border fabric, the Harriet, that yarn dyed woven. I just think I could see adding some hand quilting and like a beautiful color could just really play on that texture, add to it, add color, add interest. But I'm also really thinking about machine quilting it. Because I imagine outlining each of the shirts, really giving it some depth. And I've just kind of been in the mood for hand quilting lately, or in machine quilting. I've been in kind of a machine quilting zone after finishing that alphabet quilt. So I'm kind of thinking about machine quilting it. As far as the backing goes, because like I said, I want this to be like a cozy couch quilt. I have been enjoying a quilt that I made within the last few years that has flannel on the back. It's just so, I know that that's not a new idea. People have been putting flannel on quilt backs for a long time, but for some reason I'm very new to understanding, like actually understanding how nice that feels. And so, I don't know, I think it would be nice to put flannel on the back of this quilt. That's something I'm thinking about. I could also see myself going in lawn would be really nice. It's funny how like thick and cozy flannel is really nice on a back, and then also like fine, really soft and supple like lawn, like a cotton lawn would be good too. Either way, I want the color to be contrasting. I want it to be a bold choice for the back. So I'll just have to look through my stash, see what I have, and go from there. But that's something that I'm thinking about. Otherwise, my alphabet quilt is done. I do still have this little guy over here that I started during the quilt along. I might leave it on my wall for a little bit. I like having different projects behind my sewing machine. So there was something else I wanted to piece. When I was thinking about the quilt along, there was something else I thought about piecing. So maybe I'll piece that. I don't know, but it'll be fun to, as I look ahead, think about what else I want to put behind my sewing machine that I'll be looking at now that I have taken the shirts blocks off the wall. Also, in looking ahead, several of you have expressed interest in learning more about the fabric flowers, so I plan to do a post on that soon, and I appreciate that feedback. I'm also it's been nice getting into the rhythm of the quilt along. I've done several quilt alongs now, and this one I really tried to go for a much more like informal weekly video post that goes along with the blog content. And I liked kind of the flow of that. So I am kind of hoping to do more sort of informal videos, just like talking about the projects I'm working on or highlighting stuff that I might otherwise just put on the blog. So I am curious to know what you think about that. And if it is something that you're interested in, certainly leave a comment below. Or if there are things that you would like to see in a video, let me know about that. So other kind of general thoughts and reflections for me in this quilt along, I don't know, I always really enjoy doing quilt alongs. It's fun to think about a project, one that's already been released, kind of reflect back on it and work more in tandem with you, and see kind of your progress, pair that with some of mine, and it's a good experience. And it's also nice to revisit a project that I've already made, because that is what I'm doing a lot of the time. And so I'm able to take it in a different direction. I'm able to maybe go off topic a little bit with it, things that I wouldn't do for the first project that's going to be outlined in a pattern. So it gives me a little bit more freedom to explore, which is really fun, and to take things in a new direction. I think with shirts and alphabet this time, I think that was definitely the case. I think I was able to, I liked having two projects. I really liked having two projects. I don't know how that felt for you, if it was confusing going back and forth, or maybe you were maybe focused on one and not the other. So having both content, did it feel extraneous, or I don't know. I'm just curious. I liked being able to bounce around a little bit. That is how I operate. But I am curious to know what you think about that. And of course, it's been really nice to connect with you and to see the things that you're making. It is such a delight for me to see each of you taking your projects in different directions. So customizing alphabet to, things that you're wanting to say in a quilt, names that you're adding, just all of the different ways that you've been able to take that project as your starting point and then really make it your own. That is so inspiring to me and just really exciting, and honestly such a compliment. I love it. I love seeing all of that. I've loved seeing all of your little shirts. I've yet to see a shirt that's not cute. If you make something small, I just feel like it's automatically very cute. But yes, I hope that you've enjoyed this this quilt along as much as I have. I'd love to hear more about your thoughts, your reflections, things that you learned along the way. So leave those comments below. And then last, I do have a question from you. And let's see. So it says, "Hi, love this quilt along. Thank you. I'll send some pics of my progress. Questions. 1, can you show pictures of the back of your quilt when posting?" That is a great idea. It's funny. Last week, after I finished the alphabet quilt, finished quilting it, we went out, we did a little photo shoot and all that stuff. And then I was like, oh, I did not even get any pictures of the backing that I chose. So I will take some of those, and especially now that I've added a label, and add that in here. It'll also be in the blog post so that you can see that. And then number 2, can you tell us more about your iron? All right, so here are my thoughts on irons. I feel like, and I do talk more about irons. I think it was the second post, one that was about supplies. So I mentioned kind of an ironing setup. But where I land with irons is that I think you either need to spend a lot, so like $200, $250 for an iron, or not much, so $30. I feel like anything in that middle zone is not worth it. It's gonna leak, it's gonna break, and it's just gonna be really frustrating. I think that if you are someone, I use steam. I have to have steam. I love it. If you're more of a dry iron user, I think I would have I'm sure there's a different set of recommendations, but if you like using steam, I feel like you either have to hit that high price point or you just go for like a $30 iron. That anything in the middle there is a waste. And I have done both. I have, for long periods of time, used the $30 iron, but the caveat is you have to have a wool pressing mat. I feel like the wool pressing mat just elevates the ironing experience and makes everything so much better. So you can totally get away with having that cheaper iron, and as long as you have that wool pressing mat. I love that combo. As far as the iron that I have now, it is a Reliable Maven 140IS, and I'll put a link below. And I've had a Reliable in the past. I've had a bunch of different brands, and I don't have any affiliation with Reliable at all. But I had one in the past. One thing that you need to know about Reliables is that you cannot plug them into an extension cord. They have to be plugged directly into the wall outlet itself. I learned that one the hard way with the first one I had. And it's hard because, your sewing setup may not be next to a wall outlet. So a lot of times you need to use an extension cord. And that was the case with my first Reliable. Luckily, it stopped working pretty quickly. But luckily their customer service is really good. The iron was still under warranty, so they sent me a new one. And so after that, I knew that was the rule. You plug it directly into the wall. You do not use an extension cord. And that iron lasted, I don't know, it lasted 1.5 years, 2 years, long and like a little while, but not long. I'll be honest, not long enough considering the price point. But it was such a good iron. That after that one died, I use an iron all the time. I mean, I have one plugged in. It can be going for hours that I'm like ironing. If I'm really working on a project, I have an iron, like they get used. So probably 1.5 years or 2 years or whatever I had that first reliable was fair, given the usage that I put it under. But after that one died, I didn't immediately buy another one. I was kind of frustrated. And I went to the cheap option for a while, and I was using one of those for a while. And like I said, it's fine. It does the job. Get yourself a wool cutting or a wool pressing mat and it'll do fine. And really only recently, within the last few months, did I get this one, just because I missed having a nicer iron and I just wanted to try this one. So this reliable has, this is the iron, but on the base, that's where the water tank is. And I have always kind of wanted one like that because, like I said, I like to use a lot of steam. And I was hoping that that would make the iron itself a little lighter, but then having that bigger reserve would mean I was not having to fill up the iron as much, which is true. I never have to refill this thing. And I do a lot of ironing, so I love that. And let's see, I've had this iron for since the beginning of this year, maybe end of last year. I probably had it 6-7 months, and it's doing great. It doesn't require distilled water, so that's pretty easy. I just use tap. I make sure to unplug it after I'm done using it and take the tank out and unload it. So I'm hoping I can get more mileage out of it. I think I do need to change the filter more regularly. I haven't done that yet, but we'll see how it goes. It's, definitely a little bit more money, but so far, like, I love it. It is such a good iron. So that's kind of where I fall with irons. Lots of thoughts, but I have lots of thoughts on irons. So I do recommend this one. But I also recommend just a cheap one with a wool cutting mat. So it just depends on what you want to get out of it. But yeah, so anyway, hope that helps. If you have some fun iron, I'm curious. Let me know. What are your iron thoughts? Leave those below. Have you tried other ones? Which irons do you like? Yeah, be curious to know. But this one, I should say another thing about this one that I really like is that the steam, there's like a button for the steam right here. And so when you're pressing, the other reliable one that I had a sensor on the handle. So as soon as you touch the handle, if you had steam on, it would automatically start steaming, which was nice. This one with the button, at first, I was like, I don't want to have to press the button. But I really like having the button now. That's something I love, that feature, because a lot of times when you're pressing something, you might need to be, especially if you're pressing open a seam or something, you're using or pressing bias tape out of the tape maker, like your fingers are going to be pretty close and that steam is going to burn them if it's like automatically coming out. So what I love is that just from the trigger, I can control when the steam is coming out so that it doesn't burn my finger or do anything else. So that's something I really, 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 really like. So I am a fan. All right, well, thank you so much for all of your thoughtful questions. Thank you for joining in. It has been such a pleasure sewing with all of you. And I've loved seeing your projects, and I hope that you have had as good of a time as I have. And yeah, let me know which quilt along you would like to do next, because I don't know, we'll have to do one. I'm already thinking about the next quilt along, but I want to know, let's see, what kind of quilt along would you want to do? I have different thoughts in my mind. Do we want to do a handwork one? Do we want to do another machine one? Do we want to do a machine quilting one? I don't know. And I don't know. I have things in mind, but I'm curious to know where you're at. So if you have any thoughts, let me know in the comments below. So, all right. Well, thank you so much. I love you guys, and look forward to seeing you again soon.